Can we have a hand for our guest speaker, Steve Daniel? Mm-hmm. As should be very clear to anybody who's been doing these procedures for very long, there's a clear link between our unresolved emotional issues and our physical issues. And I've many times said, as far as I'm concerned, the reasons we have cancer and MS and lots of other things is highly contributed to by, if not completely caused by, these unresolved emotional issues. Steve specializes in that. He uses EFT as well as other things. You do your own, in fact, you're going to talk about a little bit about self-muscle testing and diagnosis and things like that. But you're in Prescott, Arizona right here, right? Yep. Okay. Is your microphone on? I don't think it's on, Lynn.
Can you hear me?
There
okay.
You go. Okay.
Okay. We're good.
All right. At any rate, you have specialized in chronic health issues.
Yes.
Using the energy techniques.
Yes.
Okay. You deal with people with environmental illness, cancer.
Yes.
Multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And name any of the others.
Yes.
Okay.
Diabetes, colitis, almost all the autoimmune disease. That's probably 90% of my practice is chronic autoimmune disease of some kind.
Which is how many people you deal with a day, or a week, or however you say it?
I probably have 600 to 700 active clients, and I'll handle, I'm going to say 50 to 80 pages a day on the phone.
Okay, you do it on the phone, almost
Right.
entirely on the
My
phone.
practice is exclusively on the phone.
Okay, much more convenient
Yes.
for the patient as well as for yourself.
Average length of time is 2 to 5 minutes to treat a person per issue treated.
Okay, all right. Now, your success ratio with some of these issues?
Well, let me say this. One thing is, I'll work with anybody, and if they don't feel like they've had a dramatic response within 24 hours, we don't charge them. We refund any fees. I probably refund twice a year. So now I don't gather data, so I haven't sent out a survey, but we have had cases from third stage melanoma and pancreatic cancer heal completely, doing nothing else within 6 weeks. I've had people in MS that we can stabilize, but they're making a choice to live in an ongoing conscious conflict, and they will not heal until they make a different choice.
And you're going to go into that kind of detail in your talk.
Absolutely.
One thing you might want to do is keep a little bit away from that chandelier just for camera purposes.
Yeah.
But with that little introduction, just in case that would get some of your interest, I'm going to give this to Steve. Thank you.
I'm going to kind of see where our needs are in terms of the breaks, in terms of what I focus on and whether we change in midstream and give you more information or do more demo. How many of you know what environmental illness is? Okay. I would like to introduce someone. Beth, would you come up here? Beth is someone that I first met on the phones. 99% of my clients I never meet. Now, I was lucky enough to meet this one, because after she recovered, she became one of my trainees and is probably our top clinician in dealing with environmental illness. We then progressed, and now she's also my fiance, so we've... So there are advantages to not being a psychologist anymore. I think it is. Yeah, what I would like for her to just describe what's happened to her, because this is real typical about who we work with and what kind of response you see.
Okay, everyone hear me okay?
Try it again. There we go.
Okay, is that better? Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, quite an introduction there. My name is Beth, and I was introduced to Steve about 2 years ago when I was in the midst of very severe environmental illness. Actually, at the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. I just knew that I couldn't breathe a lot of the time and that I was reacting to all kinds of things in my environment, everything that I ate. Every place I would go outside of my house, I'd just go home feeling terrible, and it got progressively worse. And I had tried pretty much everything that I knew to try. I was living on the West Coast at the time, so I had access to a lot of alternative therapy, so I tried everything: acupuncture, homeopathy, colon hydrotherapy, vitamins, supplements, pretty much anything that was out there. And a woman that ran our support group approached me one day. I'm 5'7", and I weighed 85 to 90 pounds then. I was just deteriorating really fast. And she said to me, she grabbed my hand and she said, "Beth, I'm really worried about you. We don't think you're going to make it." And I have the name of this guy, and if you're open-minded, I'll give you his card. He does things that are a little weird. And I'm like, hey, I'll do anything right now. So I took his card, and it was Steve's card, and I called him, and we started working together. And I really credit this work with saving my life. I know that's why I'm here. So I'm pretty emotional about some of this, so excuse me if I'm a little choked up. Anyway, we started working together, and basically, in a nutshell, the tapping codes saved me. I was having 25 to 30 reactions a day, and a lot of them were anaphylactic in nature, where my lungs would shut down, my throat would close up, and it just felt like somebody was, grabbing onto me, and I couldn't breathe. And I would call Steve in the midst of a reaction. Let's say I ate a hamburger, and I was allergic to everything except for 2 foods for like 8 months. Anyway, I would eat something, and I would go into this anaphylactic shock. I'd call Steve, he'd give me a code over the phone, I'd hang up the phone, tap it out, and that was it was gone. So that was my experience, and I used to sit and think, well, okay, this is great, this will get rid of the reactions that I'm having, the acute crises that I was having, but how am I going to heal? I just thought, I'd just keep clearing the reactions, and maybe I'd eventually get better. Well, at that point, we started dealing with some of the deeper emotional things that had been going on for me my whole entire life, that I basically was just kind of shutting down inside of myself and walling off into separate compartments within myself. And we started working on those emotional aspects as they came up. And I really think that was the huge turning point for me in my healing journey, was that we were identifying the blocks to healing, and they were largely emotional in nature. I had a lot of blocking beliefs. One of them, obviously, was that the world was not safe. I didn't think, anyone or anything was safe, and I was reacting to everything. So that was a pretty strong message that my body was giving me. Another one was that, for me, love equaled pain. And that was another thing that we had to release. And there were a lot of layers on all of these issues, but just getting to the point of starting to break through them was just made a huge difference for me in my life. Some of the other things we identified, a lot of blocking traumas that I had that I was, not in touch with, I had no memory of, and they started kind of coming up. And the great thing about this work was that I didn't have to go through the pain of all of the trauma. I didn't have to know details about the memories. Just they would come up. It was age 4, so-and-so was involved. Let's clear it. It was gone. So that was pretty profound. And it saved a lot of pain. So you didn't have to relive the pain. And I know in a lot of different therapies that I've tried and that are out there, that's what you need to do. You have to relive a lot of pain. And I was really glad that I didn't have to go there. I don't think I could have, actually. I know I couldn't have at that point. Any other stress I couldn't have made it through that.
That's good. I don't know if anybody would have a question to that.
Any questions?
I would say her case is a little more extreme in terms of having to use an EpiPen several times a day so she wouldn't die. But this is what I deal with most of the time in my practice. Which means why I had to get other people trained, because for 3 years I was on call 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I got calls 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was pretty critical for me that I got somebody else trained so that I don't work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day.
Speak over here. Okay, what I heard from Gary was that frequently the encounter with the patient would be of the order of 5 minutes. Is that characteristic of your work with her, or would this normally take a longer period of time, as we EFTs are used to, I think?
I think typically an intervention is 2 to 5 minutes per issue treated. If we treated 3 issues, it might take 6 to 15 minutes.
And I was calling like 12 times a day.
Right. And
Yeah,
see, that's one of the
I
nice things
had
about
to-
phone work. You
to get
can't
through
do
it.
this with, okay, let's see, I got an appointment next Thursday. I'll just hold this anaphylactic experience, and then I'll get in next Thursday at 3. It's really rough to work with these people. The other thing is EI patients can't go to your office.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
if they can't work over the phone, they can't work with anybody. And this is a really unserviced population, really unserviced.
Yeah. I spent a lot of nights just sitting up, having reactions and tapping on myself what I knew to do to get through until I could get through to Steve, and he was up at like 4 in the morning. So, with my oxygen tank and trying to tap through some things. So yeah, it's a very unserved population. And
I do have one story. I called her the toga lady because there was an experience where she became so reactive she could only have one bedspread that she could wear. And in Minnesota, if that's the only thing you can have touching you for 2 weeks, it gets cold
in January.
in January.
I have a question. My question is, was it necessary for the severity of her condition to neutralize the allergic reactions to the food, the toxins, before you treat the trauma? Or could you have done the trauma and then that would have released the toxicity?
Let me say this, if somebody calls me an anaphylaxis, I deal with that first.
All right, I mean, if
But
it's that bad, but
absolutely,
if it's an allergy thing,
it just depends on, you have to manage them. If they're dead, it's really hard to get to the traumas. and so what I do is I'll do what I have to do to let them manage the symptoms while we deal with the real work. But I make sure they understand this is not healing, this is symptom
Right.
management.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, there were 2 things about her case. It's one of the reasons she healed so quick. One is she had no secondary gain for being ill. And anybody with chronic disease in a relationship has behaviors that are reinforcing that illness.
Mm-hmm.
There is always an interpersonal message in every chronic disease. Okay, so that was something key. And the second thing is she was willing to do the hard emotional work. And most EI patients want to make this about physical things because all their life they've been told this is in your head. So they come to treatment with a tenacity that says this is real and this is physical. And I say, you're absolutely right, and I explain why. And I say, and if you want to get well, you've got to deal with this so that this real physical stuff stops happening.
Mm-hmm. In the number of people that you've treated for this type of sensitivity, is there a common denominator between either the severity of the trauma or the amount of sexual abuse or the amount of physical abuse, or is there a common denominator in people that develop environmental illness tied to trauma?
I wouldn't say that I know of. There probably is, but not that I've tracked.
Okay, thank you.
the one thing that that I've seen just in working on the phones with a lot of people that are in the same shape that I was, is that it seems that always, and you can correct me if this isn't the case for you, but that always the world is seen as an unsafe place.
Right. That's
And-
fundamental.
And typically, the person cannot set boundaries for themselves, so their body does it for them.
Right.
That would be the other thing.
Absolutely. And that's why, again, if they're in a relationship that's dysfunctional, then their body will keep setting boundaries that they're unable to set. And that's one of the things that help them realize that if you don't know how to say no, your body will do it for you. Okay? And one of the things that I used to talk to her about is her bozo alarm. You know, when she would look at relationships and start getting all these symptoms, I'd say, that's your bozo alarm. You need to look at that. What's that telling you? You know, that she's seeing a bozo. Now, it doesn't happen with us, but with other people. Deep hypnotherapy to get rid of that alarm. So what I want to do is I want to be sensitive. I want to be sensitive to your needs. I've got enough lecture material the last 4 days, but I want to be sensitive. So I'm going to move through a bunch of theory very quickly. The outline is very complete. I'm just going to hit high points, go through that, and then I'm going to see where people want to go if I need to slow down and go something else. I'm going to give you the theory behind the physiology and energy work very quickly because I want to spend most of the time on, okay, now that you know that, what do you do with this? And one of the things that I'm going to come back to over and over again, and I present it, is Bruce Lipton's material out of Stanford. 95% of us are born with DNA that's good. So for 95% of us, our illness is absolutely a manifestation of our beliefs that are tied to specific pictures that are holding up the table legs. And that's true for MS, that's true for diabetes, that it's primarily a perceptual issue. And if you do not change those perceptions, you will not get well. And so traditional medicine and even most alternative therapies, all they do is help people manage symptoms. They do not address the core issues. Okay? So if you don't address the core pictures, the core belief system, then you're going to have trouble with that. Something that I was going to do it later, but I'm going to do this right now. One of the things that's hard with chronic disease is that most of your people have disassociated the SUDS level for the original traumas. So I have something at the end, if I get through it, called parts work that is very effective for that. But one of the things that you don't have to do, but I'm just going to see how many people can pick this up right now. It's a very simple self-testing technique. Take you 5 minutes. It is a learned skill. You can practice it. If you have trouble, we have a video that has 13 ways to self-test. If you can't master one of them, you send the video back. Okay, so that is available. It's called the Truth Technique. You can email me or whatever. But I just want to, what I want you to do is if you were to put your thumb like this, your arms out straight, and I want you to use the same amount of stress, and I want you to watch my thumb. I want to be healthy. That's where it stops. Everybody take their thumb up. Tell me where it stops. Just kind of notice that. Okay, kind of get the sense of that. Now watch this. I want to be sick, and it stops there. How many people have a noticeable difference? Raise your hand if you had a noticeable difference. Okay, that is all you need to be able to improve your intuition 1,000% with this work. Okay, now here's another one. Okay, I want to be healthy. I want to be sick. Everybody see a difference? You're using a lot more pressure in your wrist. Use the same amount of pressure. I can force it both ways. If I stop when I get the same resistance, I want to be healthy, I want to be sick, there's a big difference. I want to do one other one. You see the wrist? I want to be healthy. See how high up it goes? Now, I want to be sick. See how high up it goes? Okay. I want to be healthy. See how high the angle is? Now watch this. I want to be sick. See how the angle stops? There's 11 more ways to do that. If you can do that, I'm sitting here testing my client. Okay, is this a trauma issue? Yes. Is this a physical issue? No. Okay. What age was the trauma? Age 3? Age 4? Okay, it's at age 4. Was dad involved? Yes. Do we need to know more information to heal this? No. Is this field 100% ready? I get a test. No. Is there a blocking belief? Yes. Do I need to identify the belief? Yes. Do you see what I'm doing? And then I'm going to ask, is this field 100% complete? Yes. Do I have 100% of this person's cooperation in healing this now? I get a no. Then I need to address something else before I start the tapping so that I have every dissociated part on the same page, on the same issue with every element of that issue before I start. Now, if you're doing that all with intuition, you're really good. Now, I can actually do it without muscle testing, but I'm really good because I've been doing this for a long time. I have probably actually treated more people than anyone else because I've been doing this for 5 years, and I do 50 to 100, treatments a day, and I've been doing that for 5 years, 7 days a week. It gives you an idea how many people I've treated. There was a question. You have to stand by a mic if you want a question.
You test them or yourself?
Both, but I'm testing them. If I'm in the room with them, I'm in their field. Okay? So I just want to give you some ideas. I'm going to be throwing out a lot of things that are very different. Example, I'm working with this client. Do they need to tap the EFT code or can they just read it? Oh, they can just read it. Most of the time they can just read it. Okay? Would it help to have them also add the chakras front and back? Yes or no? But do you see how what I want to do is aim that so I know this is the leg that needs to come off next. And then once I get it lined up, my EFT is going to be much more effective because I've taken all the hit and miss out of it. Okay. Now, at least 80% of the people master that in 15 seconds? So it's not a tough skill. If you cannot do that, you probably have a toxin issue that's blocking you, most likely something you're wearing, just to know that. Okay. Or you're heavily dehydrated. That mic's not on.
What do you do differ from TFT?
I was voice technology trained, so I do all kinds of energy things. Do I do TFT, EFT, other T's that we've developed? Yeah.
So it's very similar?
It's very similar, yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start running through material. If I'm not clear, go to a mic and tap on it. Okay. Okay. And if the mic gets much better, let me know. One of the things that this whole lecture is really about is, can you get your client to take responsibility for their own healing, or are they in a mode that says you are the doctor, wise one, and they're going to come to you and be passive in their work? And if that's their choice, they're never going to get out of treatment. Okay. Something I want to just throw out as a paradigm is, we had terrorism and it's caused a lot of deaths. It hasn't caused near the deaths that it's causing an autoimmune disease and increased alcoholism, increased diabetes, other things. The body is digital. It is either in a fight or flight mode or it is in a healing state. And we're going to talk about that more and more. So when small town America, who has more chance of getting hit by lightning than a terrorist showing up there when they're in their Walmart, if they're watching TV and seeing all these attacks every day, that disease process that is beginning is 1,000 times more deadly than any terrorist. And that's really what we're talking about, is the terrorism of the heart. Right now, the #1 cause of death in America, off from Macola.com, is physician-instituted interventions. Properly prescribed medications by the CDC in Atlanta were the #1 cause of death in America last year. Properly prescribed medications. So I just want to give you a little picture of where healthcare is today in terms of our picture. So really, if we're not going to be a casualty of that, then we're going to have to get working on some heart pictures, some heart issues, and we're going to have to teach our clients how to do that. Something was pretty fascinating when we started looking at this is every prominent physicist, and if you think about science, okay, the core science is mathematics, and then physics is above that. Chemistry is built on physics. Biology is built on that. Psychology is someplace up here in the soft sciences. So physics is really looked at as a very hard science. So if you just look at those quotes, I'm not going to read all of them, but all matter is energy field, Albert Einstein. And look at the dates when they're saying these things. The physician should look for the force and nature of illness at its source. He is not to look to that which can be seen, for we are not called to extinguish the smoke, but the fire itself. I won't try to pronounce his name, and that's in the 1400s, okay? Treating humans without the concept of energy is treating dead matter. Again, 1800, early 1900s. Future medicine will be based on controlled energy fields. Wilhelm Teller, which you spoke at some of the EFT things. The energy field starts it all. Here's one I love. The idea of the microbe as a primary cause of disease is the greatest scientific silliness of the age. Okay? What you're saying is all of those organisms are opportunistic. They're always there. The question is, what have you clicked into here that has dropped your immune function to where they get a grip on you? It's the same issue with cancer. And we have renegade cells all the time. What are you doing, and we'll get into this more, where you are changing the DNA coding in your body to elicit disease cells being formed? And that's what we're addressing. And I'm going to skip the rest of those. It's interesting. I have a 4-year postdoctoral training in psychopharmacology, and that's been very helpful. It lets me know that I would never prescribe medication no matter what they do. Even though I have the training, I'd have to be a psychologist again to do that. So, and I could tell you some interesting case studies, but I won't go there. But 2 years ago, they presented the latest research on antidepressant medication. How many research studies do you think we have that show clinical effectiveness in antidepressants for kids or adolescents? 0. There is no study in existence that shows that antidepressants are more effective in children or adolescents than placebo. And placebo is 50%. Now what placebo means is, gee, we heal the energy field and it just doesn't fit Newtonian laws. That's what placebo really means. But that just gives you an idea of where that is. I was also a consultant in clinical hypnosis for many years with the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and I've seen phenomenal healing in that. I've seen people that couldn't see very well take off their glasses, put them in trance, get out, they can read stuff across the room. Okay, they get out of trance and they don't hold it for very long. I've seen people in severe arthritic pain get out of a wheelchair, walk around, do fine, come out of trance, and they don't hold it for very long. Okay, you just think about why would that be. I used to work a lot with dissociative identity disorders, and I've had someone come in my office on oxygen straight from the hospital for severe lung stuff. What's that lung disease? One of the, no, not asthma. It's one of those lung things where they couldn't breathe. I'm blanking on what it is. But to switch in session, and the person that came out for 45 minutes had no breathing problems. And I've seen stuff like that. So what are we, and you think of the examples of what about the lady that lifts the car off the little kid? Okay, those are issues of perception. Okay? And so, like Gary says, we're all kind of walking through a dream. Which dream do you want to be a part of? And we get back to those same things. The body has the capacity to heal almost anything at any time. It really does. So the question becomes, if I'm not healing, why? Okay, and I'll address that. When I had my dance before the state, one of my dances before the state board, they wouldn't allow me to do any treatment. In fact, the examiner they sent out, I treated them, and since they got well, they fired them because I had a dual relationship with them. And so when the executive secretary wanted to be treated, they said, you can't do that because that would be a dual relationship. So I presented a research study, and I had 415 people that I treated over the phone, 6-month follow-up, average length of time on the phone, 7 minutes, 98% success rate. And the board said, psychotherapy doesn't work that way. And I said, I know. And they said, that's either like Benny Hinn's faith healing, or that's a placebo. And I said, if I can get a placebo to work 98% of the time, I'm going to use it every time. And they told me I couldn't be a psychologist because psychology doesn't work that way if you're going to use those effective placebos. Okay. And I can thank the board for many things besides having a fiance who was an ex-client. But you know, I've quadrupled my income. I've helped many more people than I ever could as a psychologist. So that paradigm, we are moving way beyond that. One of the things I just would want to read, it's one of the quotes in the back, page 11, and you don't have to turn to it. It's just a very short quote. Max Planck, one of the founders of quantum physics, noted in his autobiography that science progresses funeral by funeral. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. So presenting data, even heart rate variability data, to conventional systems, they're not going to listen. And so that whole concept of I'm going to do what heals my client, and if others aren't comfortable with that, that's okay, because it's very threatening. When I told one of the things my board had an issue with is I don't help somebody, I don't charge them. And they said, you can't do that. Okay. So I'm just saying you're working with a different paradigm. So why isn't my body doing this healing? Okay, there's a few issues. One is bad internal pictures and beliefs, and that's what we're going to focus on. I didn't bring it, but I have an RFI. It's a resonant frequencing imaging device, and it just measures frequencies off the body. And I have pictures that some of you saw last time I was here when I had been hit by jet fuel, had a severe migraine, and if you checked the chakras, they were all gray-black. After treatment, and we had heart rate variability, and you change the frequency of that with energy work, they turned gold again. Okay? If you can take tissue, and this is what homeopathy and other things are based in, and you change the frequency of that tissue from a disease state to a healthy state, and you keep it there, the tissue heals. Okay? So the first thing is bad internal pictures and beliefs. The second thing is something's genetically wrong, and that's about 5%. The third thing is that toxins block healing. But I want you to understand, my belief is that all toxin issues are ultimately a trauma issue. They may not have happened in your lifetime. They may be passed on. There's a scripture in the Bible that it's in John 4:18, and it says, perfect love casts out all fear. And I will tell you, where there is no fear, there is no toxins, there is no disease process. A couple of studies, you know, they came out a while back, and you saw all the studies that first came out that said, gee, high tension lines living under those cause leukemia and cancers, and then they came out and said, no, it doesn't. Well, they went back and looked in that, and they filled out questionnaires, and people who were living under a high stress situation develop cancer when they're under EMF. People that don't live under the high stress situation don't develop cancer. They did a study with parakeets, and they started feeding them arsenic. Didn't kill them. They then took half of them and stressed them, and I think they used some of the music that's out there today. And they died, and it wasn't from the music, it was from arsenic poisoning. So I want you to think about that, is if you're having lots of toxin reactions, your body is living in a fear state. To the degree that you're having those reactions, you're living in a fear state, okay? A couple other things. Living with a conscious conflict. This is one of the things, if I'm testing, that's blocking healing. Is this person living with a conscious conflict? Yes. And most of the time, your client will know what that is. Example, I know my relationship's deadly for me, but I don't want to be alone. Okay? I know they're abusive and alcoholic, but I don't think I can support myself. And one of the things I'll tell them is you are going to significantly block your healing until you make some lifestyle choices about that issue. Otherwise, they're wasting a lot of treatment dollars. I think that's pretty critical. Thought I saw a question. I think another one is living with a vow. And that's like a conscious conflict. My history is I've had migraines for about 25 years. Had multiple head injuries, but I had a migraine that lasted 7 years, and probably I had 3 or 4 days in 7 years that I could see my daughters out of both eyes. And so I would function by taking enormous amounts of migraine medication, a couple $1,000s worth a month, and on a scale of 1 to 10, live at a pain level about a 10, but I'm very good at dissociating. And that was my existence. I found out why, and I'd done everything, energy work, everything else, nothing would touch it. I had made a vow, and that vow would not let me heal. And until I addressed that vow, and it was involving a conscious conflict, and made a choice to release that, nothing would heal. Once I did that, within 24 hours, my migraines were 99% gone. The other thing that's interesting with that is situations that would trigger, guaranteed trigger migraines. Being with someone in a love relationship in the same situations, eating the same foods, being exposed to the same jet fuel, no reaction whatsoever. So that tells us something about the power of living in a love state that is an immediate shielding against environmental things. So something else to be thinking about in checking your people. So the point of that is that we've got to be opened up to a new paradigm for healing. I'm going to move just briefly into the energy aspect of it. You know, Einstein came in and said, it's not about matter, it's about energy. At its core level, it's not about matter. Think about this for an example. Let's say that we know someone named Fred who's going to develop cancer in 2 months. And so we go in and we start every day using an MRI, which is scanning the body for unhealthy frequencies. That's all it's doing. And for 2 months, there's no cancer there. Nothing's there. Well, the date comes and all of a sudden we get cancer. Where did it come from? It didn't come from anything physical, because we've been scanning everything physical every day for 2 months. Now we can go into theories. We can say, well, a virus is involved. But yeah, well, the virus has been there for years. Why did the virus become active now? It was something unseen that caused the cancer. And something unseen was energy. It was something up here. Okay? Traditional medicine uses a whole lot of frequency scanners, MRIs, CAT scans. They just don't treat with it. Some of you may be familiar with this heart math study. And that's where and this is very profound, they took some volunteers, they do a scraping of the inside of the mouth. They set the Petri dish across the room, and they put some probes in it, and then they have the person think about the worst memory of their life. And under microscope, they watch the DNA being damaged at that moment. They then have them think about the happiest moment of their life, and they watch the DNA start to heal. Now, does that kind of underscore what we're talking about? Okay. So if you're living in a world that says it's not safe because I hate myself, do you think you're going to get disease tissue? Okay. And actually, one of the things that Bruce Lipton says is that a lot of people, their cells heal better in a Petri dish outside of their body than in their body. No, and he validates that with clinical data. Yeah. There was a question back here, if it's on.
Actually, it's a comment, if I may. Back in 1990, I was in a bad relationship. I wasn't happy with my life, had a lot of problems, and I started getting ill. They could not diagnose anything. They did CAT scans, MRIs, etc. I started developing more and more symptoms, chronic fatigue, the whole thing. In 96, my throat started to swell. They didn't diagnose, they did another MRI, and suddenly I had 3 huge masses on my thyroid, my thymus, and my pericardium. They did 3 what they call fine needle aspirations, all diagnosed cancer. I was given 2 weeks between that and my surgery. And my question in those 2 weeks, what do I do? I was told certain things to do. When I say told, I mean,
Sure.
I went to surgery, they removed it all, and it was all benign. And they wanted to, then both surgeons demanded reviews from the pathology lab because it couldn't be. And I know what I did. I called everyone that had ever had any part in my life, good or bad, and loved them. Told them I loved them, forgave me. And I had a new grandchild, and I was told to go every afternoon and lay her right there. She was 2 weeks old when I was diagnosed. And that's all I did. And the cancer was gone.
But so you get back to perfect love casts out all fear. So what are the issues that are blocking perfect love in my life? And absolutely unforgiveness is key. Let me go through this real quick. If we go back if we change the pictures that we've got, we're going to change the DNA. And we're going to talk about ways to do that. One other thing, just real briefly, thinking about this is if you take a pill, that medication moves at the rate of 1 centimeter per second. And if you know anything about pharmacology, it degrades and loses power every step. Energy moves, light moves 186,000 miles per second. And homeopathy, as an example, becomes more powerful with the dilution, okay? Actually, energy is instantaneous. I work with people long distance over the phone. I can tell you that 98% of the time when my pager goes off, I know who it is before I look at it. Okay? Why? Because I've got a heart connection with them. So let me go into Bruce Lipton's stuff real quick. And this is the stuff I want to kind of move through. First thing is, and I'm not going to go through all this, but in traditional Newtonian medicine, they believe that the cells, the nucleus of the cell, is the brain of the cell. Okay? Well, one of the things that he showed is if you go in and you remove the nucleus, the cell still lives for 3 or 4 months. It still does all of its own stuff. The only thing it does, it doesn't reproduce. Now, most of these people that came up with this were males for some reason. Not that I'm going to suggest anything, but basically the nucleus is the gonads of the cell, and males tend to have a confusion there about where the brain is. Okay? So the point I want to make is what he found out is it is the skin of the cell wall, that actually is the brain of the cell. And it, by signals from the environment, that skin, now in our case, what is the analogy? It's our skin, our perceptions, okay? Our eyes. It's the messages from the environment that send a signal that then pull up the sleeve, the protein sleeve really on the nucleus and say, okay, what's written here? What do I need right now? Okay? And then that determines what is produced in that cell. I've got it later on. Actually, it's coming up pretty quick, so I'll go ahead and say it. There was a John Carnes study in 1988 on lactose. They had some bacteria that could not digest lactose. So they put them in a petri dish with nothing in there to eat but lactose. They thought they would die. They didn't do much for a while, and basically they went back in, pulled up their sleeves and said, does anybody in there know how to digest lactose? It said yes. They changed the DNA in the cell and they started thriving on lactose. Okay? That's at a cellular level. So we're going to talk more and more about that. But what I want to read is a quote. When a gene product is needed, a signal from its environment, not an emergent property of the gene itself, activates expression of that gene. Okay? I don't know if you understand how profound that is. 50% of a child's intelligence is the perceptions in the birth parents prior to their birth. Bruce has a great slide of 2 genetically identical mice. One was raised in a normal environment, the other one was raised in a high-stress environment. And we're going to talk more about the physiology of this, but when you're under stress, what it does is it reduces the blood supply to the front of brain, okay? Because if you're running from the tiger, I don't need to do calculus, I just need to get out of there, okay? It increases blood flow to the back of the brain. It shunts all the blood flow to the large muscles so I can get out of there, okay? So they show the embryos of these mice. And the one that was raised in a high-stress environment with an athlete, he had this little tiny forebrain, this huge body, because the message he was getting before he was born is you better come out fighting and running if you're going to survive. Well, what does that mean about inner city kids that are raised in an emotionally toxic environment? And the mother is unconsciously selecting for a child who comes out fighting or running. And what is that doing? We are dumbing down America. Every generation, we're dumbing them down by the messages we're getting. The other thing that was pretty fascinating is you guys all know about the Human Genome Project, okay, where they were going to map the human genome, and they knew we were going to get at least 100,000 genes because traditional science says our complexity comes from evolution. Okay, so we've got to have all these genes. Well, they came out with 34,000 genes. And they couldn't, well, then where does diversity come from? It's in the energy field. It's not in the DNA, it's the energy field. And so David Baltimore, a Nobel Prize winner, says, unless the human genome contains a lot of genes that are opaque to our computers, it's clear that we do not gain our undoubted complexity over worms and plants by using more genes. Okay? So as we're going further in science, most of these presuppositions, if you really look at good science, are falling away. Cancer cells are really cells that have withdrawn from the body because they do not feel loved and supported by the body. And so they're kind of doing their own thing. And just think about the lady that shared, what she did is, what is it that's keeping those cancer cells out of relationship with my body, and how do I get them back in relationship? Trying to see how much of this I want to try to go through. On page 12, and you don't have to look at it, there's a full examination of what the HPA axis is, what happens when you slam on the stress mode. And I'm just going to look at this real quickly. Most of you know this, but the first thing you do is you shunt all the blood flow. You send adrenaline out, and just in case you didn't know, adrenaline is a stress hormone. It's the same hormone that they synthesize to suppress your immune system if you're doing cancer therapy. Okay? So adrenaline slams on. You've perceived a danger in the environment. It immediately shuts down the viscera, so your digestion collapses. It shuts down sexual function because that's not real important if you're running from a tiger. Digestion's not important. All your environmentally ill people have major digestive problems. Okay? It immediately sends it to the heart, the large muscle groups. You drop your intelligence significantly, okay? But because again, it's not important to think. I mean, I know everybody's here sometime in their life had the experience of knowing the material, sitting down in an exam, and couldn't remember anything. What's a stress response? You don't have the blood flow going there. If you can't get out of the stress response, the information's not biochemically available. And so that's what happens every time. And you think about how many of your clients are coming in a constant stress response. I know we're going to talk about PTSD, and they've shown that children raised in trauma have very different brain development. It looks like ADD because they're constantly scanning the environment. Where's the danger? Where's the danger? Okay. One other thing, there's another experiment, Einstein-Podolsky experiment, and this again, it just talks about our connectedness. They took two people, had them talk for about 20 minutes, never met each other. Then they separated them in these, I'm blanking on the name, but these cages where no other things get in there. And they would, here we go. They would then stress one of them's eyes with a light, and that causes a real strong neurological reaction that they would measure in the other person. Okay. So once they connected, those physiological responses were connected. They separated them by 50 miles, by 1,000 miles, the same thing. Okay. So if you're connected to someone with love or hate, then you're active in that process one way or the other. Okay. One of the things that I've done a lot with muscle testing, and I just didn't think to do it here, is write on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, words like love, hate, and just have somebody hold that, they don't know what's in it, and muscle test them, and you'll see the arm collapse on the hate statement. The energy coming off those words. Okay? So the world has everything in it. You only see what you're trained to see. Okay? You are what you are based on specific pictures and beliefs of the heart. You think what you think based on specific pictures and beliefs of the heart. Your body and healing is where it is based on specific pictures and beliefs of the heart. I want you to think about the metaphor of the table, and if you shift aspects, if I want one of these tables to collapse, if I take one leg out completely, it collapses the fastest. If I'm taking what's the highest suds level, then I'm going around and taking an 1/8 of an inch off of each leg, and then I take an 1/8 inch off the other one. And it takes an awful lot of time to get those tables to collapse that way. And when you're dealing with people with chronic illness, you typically have a half a dozen, maybe as many as 10 core traumas that are supporting their illness. And it's very important to go looking for those. Kind of keeping an eye on time. Are there questions on that before I move on to what do you do with EFT? Okay. I'm going to talk about a resonating memory protocol. It's similar to Gary's movie, but something we use. And one of the things I'll ask is, if I have someone come in, I ask them, right now, what is threatening, and when you think about your illness, what is threatening your greatest joy and peace in life? And I ask for a specific picture of that, okay? And that's similar to the movie. I then ask, what emotion is there? And let's say they come up with depression or anger. I'll then ask, what beliefs are there about yourself, others, or the world? Once they have that, and this is homework I have them do before they call me, what is the earliest memory in your life that resonates with that same emotion? Okay. What resonates with that same emotion? If that emotion was fear, what resonates with that exact same fear? And all this is in the outline. Okay. Once they have that, I'm going to ask them the same thing. What kind of emotions, what kind of beliefs are there? Now, at that point, I'm going to be doing a little of this. Do I need to know more? Yes or no? Is the field 100% complete? If I get a yes, then I'm ready to work with that issue. If I get a no, I'm going to ask, is there a conscious conflict? Is there a blocking belief? Is there a vow coming out of that picture? And most of the time, if there's a vow coming out of the picture, I'm going to ask, I'll never be vulnerable again. I'll never let anybody close. I will never trust again. You're going to find those blocking vows. And I'll just include that in the picture. Think about that with the picture. Okay? And then at that point, the other thing that's nice about this is, how many times do I need to repeat the code, the EFT code? And also for how many days? And that's something else I tell my people is this is a lifestyle. It's not something that you're going to do one time. And you'll have people that need to spend 15 or 20 minutes a day focused on that issue, repeating that code over and over again, whether they can tap it or whether they can read it, and keep working with that picture and stay with that original picture until it completely collapses. Now, one of the things I'll say, because I always say this, I pray to include, illuminate, and heal all anchoring pictures on this issue. Okay, now I'm not having them chase other aspects. I'm asking their unconscious to provide the healing on those issues. But I tell them, if you're doing this and other pictures come up, jot them down. Because when this one collapses to a 0, you're going to go back and check those other ones. And if they're not a 0, you're going to continue that process on them. Okay? So that's one of the ways that we begin the healing process at the deeper levels.
That first question, is the first question, what is currently threatening my peace and joy in life?
Yes.
When you ask that question, you're actually forcing them to shift from their hindbrain to the creative brain.
Correct.
Because you can't go in there to look to answer that question without doing that.
That's right.
You have to be in a safe space.
That's correct.
So with our very first question, we shift to the creative. We get out of the threatening. That's as fast as it can get.
Right.
We shift in the first question. We go to the creative. We get out of the danger. And if they don't look in for that question, if they can't look inside, then they're still back in the threat.
Well, and one of the things is by saying, and a typical answer would be, well, these anaphylactic reactions or my MS. Okay, well, how does that make you feel? And how does it make you think about yourself, others, in the world? And that's where you're going to get, it's not safe. I'm powerless.
So as soon as they can go in and answer that, then they've already gone to the creative.
Right.
So that's the most powerful thing we can do, and it's done with our first question. I think that's just awesome.
Well, but we have to shift them quickly. And again, remember, I usually spend 2 to 5 minutes per intervention. So it's much better to move quick. I like to, they need to do most of the work themselves. I just aim it for them. And the more they can learn and master, the better. But coming back to that is then to say, what's the earliest experience you have of that fear, of that belief when the world's not a safe place? Now, if you're dealing with dissociation and they say, I don't have any memories, that's when I'll again say, is there an early memory I need to know about? Yes. Okay. Before the age of 5? Yes. Okay. Before the age of 4? No. Okay, it's 4. Okay. Was there someone else involved? I'm going to get a yes or no. Was it dad or mom? Yes or no. Is it something they did? Is it something they said? Is it something they didn't do? And between every question, I'm asking silently, do I need to know any more? Most of the time, I don't have to have a lot of detail. Okay. I'm just asking your internal movie maker, your internal image maker to paint a picture of something that was happening. Dad was involved. You're 4 years old. And there's a belief that came out of that the world's not safe. Whether or not they come up with a picture is not all that critical at that point because I've already aimed it. Okay. And again, most of your somaticizers do not have a lot of SUDS because they've split it off. They wouldn't need the body symptoms so they could feel their feelings. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why I find this so helpful with these populations. The other thing is to be able to say, do I need to know more now before they start doing this work? Something else is, are they ready to know more? Because sometimes I'll test, is it okay for them to know more about this memory? And it's no. They need to collapse the pain on this long before they can even begin to look at these pictures. Okay. So that's just some of the tools that I think help move us through it pretty quick. And again, with chronic disease, you're talking about changing the frequencies of body tissue. With an emotion, you get the SUDS down to nothing. If somebody's got chronic disease tissue, it's going to take repetition over time. They're going to have to commit to doing this, whatever that is, 15 or 20 minutes a day, twice a week. But that's ultimately, right here is where their most profound healing is going to come across. Now, by doing this, do I test them for environmental toxins and say, yeah, don't wear that wool, don't, watch the foods? Yes, because they can't manage the symptoms without that. And so I try to teach them how to do that. And again, that's one of the values of this skill. It's pretty easy. Corn, I want to be healthy, corn, I want to be sick. That's all it takes. Then they can learn how to test themselves where they're not calling me 50 times a day testing everything. So again, what I'm looking at is how can I put tools in their hands where they don't have to call me. Are we in our 5 minutes? Okay, I'm just kind of tracking that. Okay, I thought so. I have an internal clock here. I want to throw out just one thought, and this is real critical, that memories are only memories to the conscious mind. To the unconscious mind, they're current events. So you're asking your client, what are your specific current events that keep the body from healing? How do you address them? So what are the pictures on their walls that they're looking at 24 hours a day that emphasize this is not a safe world? I have to stay vigilant all the time. One of the things I'll ask them is, if you were, what's your metaphor for who you are? Are you a castle? Are you a rock? Are you a tree? Beginning to, especially if they're blocked, getting them into what that metaphor is real helpful.
I would like you to repeat that prayer. I pray to include and eliminate.
Yeah, I pray to include, illuminate, and heal all anchoring pictures on this issue. Anchoring, like a boat, it anchors. In other words, what are the pictures on the wall that are anchoring in this issue not healing? Okay, yeah. I pray to include, illuminate, and heal all anchoring pictures on this issue. And I can tell you without the codes, there's no way they can look at these pictures. There's no way they can process them. And if they're going to do it in traditional therapy, they're going to be in every day for the rest of their life. They've got too many there. And so you're giving them a way to collapse that on their own when they're not with you and stuff comes up. Like Beth, they work on it all night long. Now they may need help finding all the aspects, and that's where you're.
So you ask them to pray? You ask them to
Yes.
pray?
Yeah. Right. Go to the mic and ask that question.
So that means that you ask the client to pray for themselves every day or so many times a day?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I will say that for most of my clients, if they don't develop a spiritual connection, they're pretty limited in their ability to heal because the forgiveness is just not there. And I know for Beth, that was a real critical part in her healing is reattaching to God's spirit in terms of her own healing. again, one of the things that I'm going to ask you guys to think about on the breaks is, do you want more demo, more lecture, more how to apply stuff? And let me know when you get back. And it's at 2:54 on my clock, and we're going to go for 15 minutes. I'm going to have you share one thing real quick.
I have been working with muscle testing for probably 5 or 6 years with no success. And just watching Steve do it, trying it, I found it, I can do it.
Right.
It's simple. It's just, I mean, it was just like a yay. So I just want to, for those of you who think it's hard to do, it isn't.
Right. And I can tell you, and I wasn't trying to plug that, but since people have asked, there is a tape, it's $85, that has 13 ways to self-test. If you can't master it, you send the tape back after a month and you get everything but your shipping back. Okay, there's also a set that has some other things, emotional things, clearing sensitivities. You can look at that back there. That's on this form. There is a training set that has a lot more stuff in it that I think we have some blue brochures that describes that, that teaches you a lot about developing different codes. 95% of the time, EFT is all you're going to need, but when sometimes with real complex cases, it helps to have other alternatives, and that's what that would be for. Okay.
Can I suggest, rather than doing more tapes, that look to go into CDs, because like people outside the United States can't use your tapes.
Okay.
That way, in like the CDs are cheaper and smaller and lighter and like that.
And we may do that. You know, this was our first project, and you learn a lot when you do things.
Okay.
A lot. So that, now I didn't bring the tape sets here because I couldn't get them all in my Suburban, and because I customize them if somebody wants just the first set versus the first and third. That's why I did not bring them, but there are order forms. You can always email me that stuff. I have enough that I should be able to send out a lot next week if that was a desire. Okay.
I was wondering if you were going to address how it is you are able to make money doing this, because I've worked with some clients with chronic illness who are completely disabled and homebound and they have no money.
Right. I would say this, that I can't take everybody that wants to work with me for lots of reasons. And there's, I would say I write off between $150,000 and $200,000 a year working with that particular population. So in terms of making a good living, don't specialize in environmentally ill patients because most of them are on disability. Okay. But what I do is I give a portion of my practice to low-fee clients. And,
Okay, thanks.
but that's what I do. I have to limit that because I also need to do other things and take care of a family and things. I gave you a lot of information real quick. That's kind of my style. And then I'm going to kind of move on, but I want to come back and see where people are, and then we want to do a demo. Were there things that weren't clear? Go to the mic.
You talked about codes. I had no idea what you're talking about.
That's just shorthand. When you start tapping, this is a code. This is the EFT code. So when you say EFT, I just use the word code. In other words, this is a healing code for the body. It contains a language. You're tapping in a healing language to the body when you go, crown of the head, eyebrow, eye, outside of the eye, under the nose. That's what it is. It's just a language that I've gotten used to using.
Yeah, I was just looking at your tapes and stuff, and you've got a whole sheet in there about things to avoid, and so forth. Is that just sort of like to get them through the treatment, and then once they're through the treatment, they don't have to take all those precautions of avoiding the allergens and stuff?
Oh, okay. When we're dealing with autoimmune people, it really depends on where they're healing. If somebody calls me up, the first thing I'm going to do is say, give me a list of everything you eat, everything you wear, all your personal care products, and everything your partner wears. Because for now, we're going to take that stress off the body until we can get you in a healing response. Because I don't want to, otherwise what you're doing is I'm pouring water in a bucket that's got all these holes in the bottom. Let's plug the holes. Because if I'm doing 25 phone calls a day dealing with crisis response because of their laundry soap, so I will absolutely use this and test them and clean up their environment and clean up their diet first. Now, do they have to stay on that long term? No. Beth has very few things. For a while, if somebody came within 6 feet wearing wool, now in Minnesota, she would go into anaphylaxis. Now she can wear wool. but she had to avoid it for a while.
Right.
And so it's very common with those people to clean up their environment, say you're going to have to avoid these things to give your body time to heal. Someone else asked me about yeast. Do I often find candida? Yes. Do we work with that? Yes. Do I also use nutritional things that help them with that? Yes. So it's not, you know, it's a very complex issue and you have to help manage aspects of it. What I shared is where the deepest healing comes from.
Right.
But you absolutely have to help manage it.
Thank you.
Beth said she would call you and you would give her a code. So it's not always EFT. Sometimes you're doing a specific algorithm that we don't know about.
Right. I was originally trained in voice technology, and so I use lots of things. Because for me it's visual and instant, when I look at you, I get the code you need right now, just like that. And so that's actually the easiest thing for me to give you.
And would that code work in many situations? You're looking at me thinking of a code. You could give that to me and that would be my magic code?
It would probably be specific to the issue you're working on at that moment. Now, might you reuse that for other things? Yes. But example, let's say that you got hit by diesel and I gave you a code that cleared you on diesel. Now, probably if you can get to the core trauma on that, you could use EFT and collapse that trauma. But if you're in anaphylaxis at the moment, it would be faster for me to give you a code that knocks you out of the anaphylactic at that moment. Now, that code may work for perfume, but it may not. It just depends on how the body's going to respond to that. It may take a different one.
So the codes don't necessarily involve all the reframing and talking. It might just be tapping 2 or 3 spots. And this is something you're going to demonstrate today?
I'm going to stay with demonstrating EFT today because that's what this is for, and that's what you guys know how to do. So I'm going to teach you how to apply that. Doing everything else that I do would take weeks, being honest. It's not something I can do in a single 3-hour block. But what I want you to understand is you have the tool to go at the core issue, and if you can do this, you can help them manage their environment. You don't really need a lot of other tools. It's just that since I came from another place, they're automatic for me. Yeah, are we ready to go on? Yeah. Okay, let me see where I was. I think it's absolutely critical to put the body in that growth healing state. One of the things he said is just getting them out of the fear response, is critical. If they stay in the fear response, it's kind of like if Beth stayed in anaphylaxis and I couldn't get her out of that, I can't do anything else. And so if it was the same way, I would tell my clients, if you go into a response and you don't know what to do, I will tell you that tapping the edge of the palm and under the nose back and forth will pull anybody out of anaphylaxis. Okay? I've seen somebody go down on a salad line and I can touch them with my foot so that I don't get arrested for treating without permission, and I can start doing this and pull them out of anaphylaxis. Under the nose? Yeah, right here? Under the nose, it's one of your spots, and edge of the palm. Just go back and forth, you'll pull somebody anaphylaxis. So what I absolutely say, if you're going to anaphylaxis, start doing this, and in between, run your EFT code, absolutely. Okay? Because I want to give them all the tools, because I don't really like those 2 o'clock calls, because I don't get them anyway. I turn it off when I go to bed. So I'm just saying, I want to give them all the tools they can. You have those tools. But you've got to put them in a healing state. And so one of the things you're going to come back to over and over again is, what are those beliefs? What are the specific pictures? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. One of the things that I would encourage you to do in testing people, and this is just going to be a little different because I'm a little different. If you put your hands like in the praying position, take your index fingers and touch them to the inside corner of your eyebrows. One of the things I'll have people do on an issue is, in that position, read the EFT code instead of tapping it while they're focusing on an issue. A lot of times that'll just collapse it quicker. So you can try different things. Is that going to make it quicker for them? Is it going to make it more powerful? It tends, because you're connecting a whole lot of energy circuits, it tends to pull the body out of a fear response very quickly.
Could you demonstrate that?
Okay, yeah. Hands are in the prayer position. Okay. Index fingers are on the inside corner of the eyebrows. You know your eyebrow spot that you tap? Okay. I will tell you that if they were having an inhalant reaction, I would probably use the middle finger instead. A what reaction? Inhalant, perfume and inhalant. I would hold it. I would just hold this while they're repeating the EFT sequence in their mind. while they're repeating the sequence. This will pull them into a state. And one of the things I find for most people is if you've tapped this a few times, your body will reactivate it by just reading it. Okay? And that's nice for people in public that don't want to be tapping, but they know they can just read the code internally. I have very few people that I work with that ever tap because they can just read the codes. Okay? So that's just another helpful tool. We've talked about this, and when I talk about a field, I'm talking about the thought field we're addressing. So if I say, what is the specific picture to this issue? And do I need to know more? Yes or no? Is this field 100% complete? Yes or no? And for me personally, before I say, go with the code, and that's my word for EFT, I'm going to say, I want to get a yes. I have 100% cooperation, and I'm ready to heal this now. And then I have 100% of this field so that it's a complete picture. I have all the aspects on this picture to heal right now. And I get a much more complete response that way. That's the value of this. And again, if you guys have worked much with chronic illness, most of the time they don't connect into an emotional layer. It's very hard to use SUDS as a response to say, are they better? And then I can go, is this field 100% complete? Is the healing 100% complete? Yes, now let's go to the next one. And that's what I try to teach them how to do that so that they know it's 100% complete. They can start working on that next picture that came up. Okay? Given the client's history, if they had a belief, emotion, trauma, keeping their body in a protect fear mode, what would it be? Let me say this. Frequently, let's say I'm dealing with a symptom and I'll ask, I'm 100% ready to release this headache, and I'll get a no. By the way, constant headaches are the most common symptom for dissociation where you're blocking something, okay? And as an expert on migraines, I have a little data on that. Okay? But I'm just saying constant unremitting headaches are almost always a trauma-based issue, almost exclusively. Okay? So you begin looking at that, and I would be saying, okay, am I 100% ready to release this headache? And I would get a no. Okay, is there a blocking trauma? Is there a blocking belief? Is there a blocking emotion? Now, typically under that, okay, am I ready to release this emotion? I often get a no. Am I ready to release this belief? I'll get a no. Am I ready to release the trauma? I'll get a yes. A lot of times I've got to go to, again, that specific picture, that specific trauma, and then I can ask, can I include the belief? Can I include the emotion? Can I include the symptoms? Sometimes not. But by addressing the trauma first, you almost always have to collapse the trauma, the specific trauma, before the body's going to release the symptom. The body's saying, hey, I want some attention, and I'm going to get it one way or the other. Trying to decide how much of this to go into. I'm on page 6, major points to remember about using EFT to change heart pictures. And I'm about page 8. Number 8, sorry about that. Most of you have done quite a bit of metaphor work, okay? And I would say that the metaphor is always an expression of who they are in the world. And their symptom is always an expression of who they are in the world. And looking at it from that level and saying, you know, if this symptom were to go away tomorrow, what would be different in your life? Okay, that's real important. You know, what is this holding in place? How would your relationship change if this were gone tomorrow? I've had a lot of people say, I can't get well and stay in my relationship or stay in my job. I mean, that's real common. They're living in a conscious conflict. Something else I want you to think of is that every symptom, and this is critical to know, at every chronic symptom, from some perspective, establishes a position of safety in the world. Establishes a position of safety in the world. At some level, that chronic symptom is saying, I would rather do this than do or know about this. And again, what I'm trying to do is give you some areas to start looking at with people. Okay? I would rather have this pain than what? To know about what it is. What would be the one thing worse that could possibly happen than having this pain? What would those things be? You're going to look at what those issues are. What are the beliefs about those issues? And how does this protect them? Okay. I know for me, if I had a migraine all the time, I didn't have time to think about or deal with other issues. And if I looked at what's the only thing in my life that could be worse than living this pain all the time, and I addressed that issue, what is it? Well, it would be putting my kids through the pain of divorce. So I had made a conscious vow that I would die before I would do that. And my body was trying to accommodate my vow. And so I had to address that issue for my healing because nothing else was going to make a difference. And so part of it, you're asking your clients, how serious are you about being well? How has the client organized themselves in the world to have an experience of safety, significance, and power? Tell you what, a lot of people are married. That is their identity. Okay, I have MS, and because I have MS, people will now. Okay, I have environmental illness, and I've seen a lot of couples, and well, let me just tell the story. A neurologist that, when I used to work at Flagstaff, used to send me all the tough cases, sent me a lady with MS that had it for 6 years, had all the symptoms, was on medication, and he said, I don't think she's got MS. And they came in, and her husband was an engineer, and he doted on her hand and foot. He just was there with bated breath. And being that my ex's family is all engineers, and I'd never seen that behavior in an engineer, I didn't think it went with the personality. And so when he walked out of the room, I said, I'm just blown away by how attentive and loving he is. I'm just amazed. And she goes, well, he wasn't always that way. And I said, when did that change? And she said, when I got MS. I asked her if she's willing to give that up. And she was symptom-free in 6 months. And this is before I was even doing tapping, okay, doing any of the tap energy work. But it was very clear this gave her a position of significance. She can get her needs met. Illness, look at that. Here's another issue, key issue. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with, how many women, that if they were sick, they were not molested. So being sick was being safe. How many ones that the only time they got love was when they were sick? I'll tell you, a lot of clients I've had doing parts work, dissociation, who release virus after bacteria after bacteria. They're constantly sick, and they have internal parts that just hold those, and whenever they're triggered in the environment, they release a bacteria or virus and they get sick. And I can tell you, you'll test them, they'll have active live virus, they'll have active symptoms. You ask if that part's 100% ready to release the trauma. You treat them, you test after it, their symptoms are gone in an hour, the virus is 100% dead. The body has that capacity. I do that all the time. Okay? All the time. If somebody's got a virus or bacteria and you're treating the underlying issue, is this new or is this something the body's releasing? If it's releasing, ask if you have cooperation to clear the trauma that that's related to. Okay? And I know this is a real different paradigm we're talking about, real different.